Hi, and welcome back to my channel, Learning Biology with Dr. Vanessa, where I take difficult biological concepts and make them easy to understand. If you've been following along with our series on the muscular system, you have learned how muscles are structured, how muscle contraction happens through the sliding filament theory, and how the neuromuscular junction works. But there's one big question left. Where does the energy come from to power all of this? Skeletal muscles are unique because they can rapidly shift between low activity when they're at rest and high activity when you're moving or exercising. When relaxed, they use only small amounts of ATP, but during contraction, their demand for ATP skyrockets. No other cell type in the body switches energy use this dramatically. The challenge is that muscles store only a limited supply of ATP, just enough to power contractions for a few seconds. That means they must constantly find ways to regenerate ATP quickly and efficiently, or contraction would stop. In this final video of our muscle series, we'll be discussing muscle metabolism and learning the different ways our muscle fibers produce and use energy. We'll look at the immediate, short-term, and long-term systems that keep your muscles contracting properly. Every single muscle contraction requires ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You can think of ATP as your body's energy currency. Just like you need money to buy anything, your muscle cells need ATP to pay for every step of contraction. If you remember from our sliding filament video, the myosin heads are like little molecular motors pulling on the thin filaments. In order for this to happen, ATP needs to be present. ATP binds to the myosin head, allowing it to release from actin. Then, as ATP is broken down or hydrolyzed into ADP and phosphate, it repositions the myosin head for the next cycle and provides the energy needed for another pull. Without ATP, myosin stays locked onto the actin. The problem is, muscles don't store much ATP. Like I mentioned before, there's just enough for a few seconds of contraction. So the muscle has to constantly regenerate ATP to keep working. Today, we're going to be looking at those three main systems your muscles use, depending on how long and how hard you're working. First, we'll talk about the creatine phosphate system, which is quick but short-lived. Then we have the anaerobic glycolysis, which is fast but less efficient and no oxygen is needed. Then we move into aerobic respiration, which is slower but efficient and it does require oxygen. Let's start with the creatine phosphate system. When your muscles are at rest, they actually make more ATP than they need. Instead of wasting this extra energy, your muscle fibers use it to synthesize creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is made with the help of an enzyme called creatine kinase, which transfers a high-energy phosphate group from ATP to a molecule of creatine. Creatine itself is a compound that your liver, kidneys, and pancreas naturally produce from amino acids, and it's then transported to your muscle fibers. Once inside the muscle fibers, creatine can be turned into creatine phosphate, which is about 3 to 6 times more abundant than ATP in a relaxed muscle. When you suddenly start contracting a muscle and ATP is used up, creatine kinase works in reverse. It transfers the stored phosphate from creatine phosphate back onto ADP, quickly generating new ATP. This system kicks in almost immediately, which is why it's the first energy source your muscles tap into when activity begins. The downside is that it doesn't last long, only about 10 seconds. After that, the creatine phosphate supply runs low and your muscle switches to other energy systems. This is why creatine supplements are popular among athletes. They increase the amount of creatine phosphate stored in muscle, giving a little more short-term power. When muscle activity lasts longer than those 10 seconds and the supply of creatine phosphate has been used up, your muscles will switch to breaking down or catabolizing glucose in order to generate ATP. Glucose can enter into the muscle cells from the blood through facilitated diffusion, or glucose can come from the breakdown of glycogen stored within the muscle fiber itself. Once glucose is available, glycolysis kicks in. This process happens in the cytosol of the cell, doesn't require oxygen, and works quickly. Each glucose molecule is broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, producing a net gain of 2 ATP molecules. Now, normally, pyruvic acid would move into the mitochondria to continue through oxygen-dependent reactions called aerobic respiration. But when you first start exercising, your muscles demand more oxygen than your body can deliver right away. Until your breathing and circulation catch up, glycolysis runs without oxygen. In this case, instead of entering the mitochondria, pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid. This is what we call anaerobic glycolysis. It's fast, and it provides enough ATP to power about 30 to 60 seconds of intense activity, like running a 400-meter sprint or lifting weights for a short set. The trade-off is that it only produces 2 ATP per glucose molecule, and lactic acid builds up as a byproduct. That lactic acid is what contributes to the burning sensation you feel during tough exercise. The good news? Once oxygen delivery catches up, your body can clear the lactic acid and even recycle parts of it back into usable energy. If enough oxygen is present, for instance, once your respiratory rate and circulation rate catch up with delivering oxygen to the muscles, or during longer, steady activities like walking, jogging, or even maintaining posture while studying, your muscles rely primarily on aerobic respiration. This process takes place in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Here, in the presence of oxygen, pyruvic acid continues to be broken down through the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Although aerobic respiration is slower than anaerobic glycolysis, it generates far more ATP, about 32 molecules per glucose, making it highly efficient. It can sustain muscle activity as long as oxygen and nutrients are available. Muscle tissue receives oxygen from 2 sources. First, the oxygen that diffuses into the muscle fibers from the blood, and secondly, the oxygen that is released by myoglobin within the muscle fibers. This is why endurance athletes focus on training their aerobic systems. They're optimizing their muscles' ability to efficiently use oxygen to generate ATP over extended periods. After intense exercise, you may notice you're breathing heavily even after you stop. That's because of something called oxygen debt. This term refers to the added oxygen over and above the resting oxygen consumption that is taken into the body after exercise to pay back or restore metabolic conditions to the resting level. Your body needs extra oxygen to replenish ATP and creatine phosphate stores in muscle fibers, convert lactic acid back into glycogen stores, and reload oxygen onto myoglobin. This recovery process is essential to prepare your muscles for the next round of activity. Because this extra oxygen is being actively used to repair, restore, and rebuild energy stores in the muscles, rather than a literal debt to your body, a better term to use for this process is recovery oxygen uptake, because it more precisely describes what's actually happening. This recovery process ensures your muscles are ready for the next bout of activity and helps prevent fatigue from lingering byproducts. Skeletal muscle fibers aren't all the same. They vary in structure, function, and how they generate energy. One key difference is myoglobin content. This is the red pigmented protein that binds oxygen within muscle fibers. Fibers with high myoglobin are called red muscle fibers and appear darker, while those with low myoglobin are called white muscle fibers and appear lighter. Red fibers also have more mitochondria and a denser network of blood capillaries, which helps them produce energy efficiently. Muscle fibers also differ in how quickly they contract and relax, which metabolic pathways they use to generate ATP, and how fast they fatigue. The speed of contraction is largely determined by how fast the ATPase in the myosin heads hydrolyzes ATP. Based on these structural and functional characteristics, skeletal muscle fibers are classified into three main types. The first are slow oxidative fibers. These fibers are dark red, rich in myoglobin, well supplied with blood capillaries, and packed with mitochondria. They generate ATP primarily through aerobic respiration. This is why they are called oxidative fibers. They are slow because their myosin ATPase works more gradually, making their contraction cycles slower than fast fibers. Slow oxidative fibers resist fatigue and are ideal for prolonged, sustained activities like maintaining posture or running long distances. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibers are the largest fibers and also appear dark red due to high myoglobin and abundant capillaries. They generate ATP through both aerobic respiration and anaerobic glycolysis, giving them a balance of endurance and power. Their myosin ATPase works 3 to 5 times faster than in slow oxidative fibers, allowing rapid contractions. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibers are recruited for moderate duration, high-intensity activities like walking briskly or sprinting. And then there's fast glycolytic fibers. These fibers are pale or white with low myoglobin, few capillaries, and relatively few mitochondria. They contain large amounts of glycogen and rely mostly on glycolysis for ATP. They can hydrolyze ATP very quickly. Fast glycolytic fibers are adapted for short bursts of powerful activity like weightlifting or throwing a ball, but they fatigue quickly. Most muscles contain a mixture of all three fiber types, though the proportions vary based on the muscle's function, an individual's genetics, and their training habits. This diversity allows muscles to perform a wide range of activities, from endurance tasks to explosive movements. So there you have it, a closer look at muscle metabolism and how the muscles generate that ATP it needs for contraction. And we also looked at the different types of skeletal muscle fibers and how their structure and metabolism make them suited for different tasks. From the endurance-focused slow oxidative fibers to the fast, powerful glycolytic fibers, your muscles are truly designed to handle a wide range of activities. Understanding these differences not only helps you appreciate how your body moves, but it also gives insight into how training, genetics, and lifestyle can influence muscle performance. Thanks for joining me through this series. If you found it helpful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so more people can learn how their body works. And remember, the more you understand your body, the better choices you can make for your health and future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.